My fellow Americans,
let's talk about the situation at the border. We've seen a huge surge in migrants crossing the border since January. The number of children in custody higher than it was than its 2019 peak during the Trump administration. Your colleague Veronica Escobar of Texas called the conditions there unacceptable. She was there on Friday. Is she right? What more must be done?
Actually, the facts are these. There are more children, about 600-700 more children, unaccompanied children, coming over the border. This is a humanitarian challenge to all of us. What the administration has inherited is a broken system at the border, and they are working to correct that in the children's interest. I'm so pleased that the president, as a temporary measure, has sent FEMA to the border in order to help facilitate the children going from one 72-hour issue into where they are cared for as they are transferred into family homes or homes that are safe for them to be.
And I have to confess, I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021, when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children.
Russia said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. This is about preventing war. It's always been about preventing war. My husband is a combat veteran. He's deployed now. The last thing I want him or any of his military brothers and sisters to do is to go to war.
But I think it is time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia.
One of the reasons that the administration has hesitated is because they believe it will escalate things even further with Russia pull the U.S. further in. Why not? Why do you think that's a good idea?
Because it's Russia that has escalated this war. Russia has learned how to pull its forces back out of the range where we have allowed Ukraine to use our weapons and get our support.
American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they've done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
A U.S. official has confirmed to CBS News President Biden has given authorization for Kyiv to use U.S.-supplied long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory.
Sitting here with my father, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
You won't answer the question about whether or not that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you.
British police came into the embassy and arrested.
After a long flight from the UK, Julian Assange's day began on the island of Saipan, a tiny territory chosen because it's the closest US court to Australia. This normally quiet courthouse, swarming with reporters as the WikiLeaks founder arrived flanked by former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd.
Individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
What I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
So what is the threat to democracy? People on both sides, people in power, saying out loud that they want to control what you get to hear and see. It is real, it is a threat, and it is happening and growing. And I'll tell you what, punishing thought is on the agenda. And I just heard it from someone who's not a kook, not Alex Jones, not Tucker Carlson, one of the most sober and intelligent politicians of our time, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I think it's important to indict the Russians, just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg admitted that the Biden administration repeatedly pressured Meta to censor content, including information about Hunter Biden, and Zuck admitted that he also regrets complying with these demands. In a letter to the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, Zuck writes, quote, "The FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it."
You know, you do some tweets that seem to be, or at least give support to some who would call others conspiracy theories.
Well, yes, but I mean, honestly, you know, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true.
Which ones?
Well, like the Hunter Biden laptop.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am in awe of Ms. Jankowicz. When the department picked her, did it know that she had said that Mr. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation? Did it know that she had vouched for the veracity of the Steele dossier?
Senator, let me repeat myself and add an additional fact. One, we do not discuss internal hiring processes.
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you to guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech.
To be a conspiracy theorist is to have been right all along, despite the efforts of the paid-for liars. And it's also to be demonstrably well ahead of the gullible, still believing in smoke and mirrors. Conspiracy theorist was first used by the CIA to shut down those who doubted the official line about the murder of John F. Kennedy. that fishy old tale about a lone shooter and a magic bullet, and then that lone shooter being shot by another lone shooter before he could talk. That was in the 1960s, and from then, the label conspiracy theorist worked for decades as the means to make thinking people too scared to speak when they smelt a rat. Let 2024 be the year of clearing out the rubbish, the trash, the long overdue year when the past or sell-by date labels, conspiracy theorist among them, are cast into the dustbin of history.
Wake up, everybody. Live is Redacted today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
Welcome into the big show today. We've got a busy show for you today. President Biden is coming to the rescue of Americans who have had their homes destroyed by the wildfires in California. Wait till you hear the unbelievable rescue plan that the Biden administration has put in place to save all of you. We'll get to that story today on the show.
Plus, Donald Trump's new tax plan is not to tax you, but to actually do business with the world and make money for the American economy with the External Revenue Service. This means maybe you wouldn't have to break your back so hard to keep the country running so we can run up the deficit. That would be exciting. We're going to take a look at that exciting new tax plan.
Also, we're going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. Of course, John B., the choice for the head of the CIA, Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the DNI. Where do they come down on this FISA warrantless wiretapping of Americans right now? Of course, Tulsi Gabbard seems like she's flip-flopped on that. We're going to talk to a CIA whistleblower who was imprisoned by the Obama administration. Yes, he called out the crimes that the CIA was carrying out in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then the Obama administration put him in prison for it. So we're going to talk to John Kirikow here on the show in just a little bit.
Also, are schools teaching racism? We're going to speak to the author of the new book, Lies My Liberal Teacher Taught Me. It's a fantastic book. It's a manual we've actually used in our house when our son comes home with some nonsense that he learns in American education. So I'm excited to have him on the show for the first time as well.
Yeah, so we got a lot of news to get to today. Thank you guys. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to the show. It's free to subscribe, whether you're following us here on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, streaming. We're also live every day on Beck Television as well. So thank you guys for joining us. Before we get to all of the news, we want to tell you about our show sponsor.
That's right. You may recall that Redacted is brought to you by Shopify. Shopify is the place that you need to go if you need to grow your business. Even if it's just a seed of an idea, you can start at Shopify and they can walk you through every step of the way. You don't need to learn how to program a website, graphic design, how to do e-commerce. They do it all for you. And in fact, the Redacted store, if you go on over to redactedstore.com, that runs on Shopify. Every time we have an idea for something that we think you might enjoy, a Redacted mug or a t-shirt, we just launch it on Shopify because that's how easy it is. So right now, you can go to shopify.com/redacted and sign up for a 1-month free trial in order to decide if you want to actually launch your idea to the world. And you should. If you have an idea, you should become an entrepreneur and do it. That's what the American spirit is for. So right now, it's a new year, 2025, and you're thinking, how am I going to make this year different? Execute on your ideas. Head on over to Shopify and let them help you get started. One more time, that's shopify.com/redacted. Do it.
Do it.
Become successful. We want to see what you have to offer the world. Start with Shopify.
Capitalism. Sorry, all you liberals who love socialism out there. Sorry to disappoint you. Well, how about this story? If you live in Ukraine, congratulations. You are going to receive $65 billion. Yes, the United States government handing over $65 billion to Ukraine. If you live in California, however, you'll receive $770. thanks to the wildfires. $770. So brain-dead President Biden basically just read off a prepared script about the aid that's coming from the Biden administration into California. And he said, quote, people impacted by these fires are going to receive a one-time payment of $770. I'm not making this up. Watch.
I want to be clear. We're not waiting until those fires are over to start helping the victims. We're getting them help right now, as you all know. People impacted by these fires are going to receive one-time payment of $770, one-time payment, so they can quickly purchase things like water, baby formula, and prescriptions. So far, nearly 6,000 survivors have registered to do just that, and $5.1 million has gone out.
That will get you about 1.5 nights stay at a hotel in Los Angeles.
If there's any left.
Yeah, like if my house burnt down, I'm currently, like where I'm sitting right now within 3 feet of me is, I mean, I've got PCs and laptops and all that stuff. Like I've got more than $770 within 2 feet of me.
You cannot replace your current affairs with $700.
And also,
glad you can get
just like North Carolina, it's like you got to register for it. You're talking about people that have no internet, who have no infrastructure right now, that have to try to find a way to go register for this. If they have a car to even get somewhere to do it in person, like it's a joke. They know that people aren't going to be able to get there or do it.
Right. They're like mailing address. The mailbox is burned down.
Yeah, I don't have a
Just
mailing
drop it
address.
on the front lawn.
Where are you going to send this check to, by the way? Is it going to be a direct deposit? Oh, okay. So after he made this announcement, reporters tried to get answers, but of course he sat there like he was crapping his pants and not answering any questions, just kind of like smiling and looking around as reporters were throwing all sorts of questions at him. Watch this.
That's enough of that. That's like a meme for senioritis. Literally senioritis.
Senioritis started when he became president. I mean,
he's like, why are you yelling at me?
Yeah, I just gave him $770. Like, what didn't you understand about that? Like,
Is it January 21st yet?
I gotta go take a nap. But don't worry though, Kamala Harris was right there to also deal with this and to level some answers and to really, I think Kamala, she just provided a lot of comfort for what people are going through right now.
And so it's critically important that to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and unprecedented crisis, that you do.
Yeah.
Hey, Californians.
Thank you.
She could be your next governor. Would that bring you comfort? Because polls are showing that she may want that job. There you go. That person has some answers. What's her answer? Find some patience.
Find some patience. Just have patience. You know, you lost everything.
Inside of you, somewhere.
Let's pause for a second, though, and just think about this. $770. That's what people in California who've lost everything, homes, possessions, some cases, loved ones, are supposed to survive on. Meanwhile, billions are being shoveled out the door to fuel a war thousands of miles away, a proxy war run by the CIA. How is this acceptable? $65 billion going to the most corrupt government in Europe so that they can carry out a proxy war. An entire generation of young Ukrainians are all killed as a result of it. Thanks, CIA. Just for context here, we learned this week that the administration is gearing up to ship yet another $1 billion check overseas to Ukraine, adding to the $65 billion that we've already sent. By the way, that $65 billion number, that's the number we know about. Estimates are it's likely well over $100 billion because we've been shoveling them money since 2014 after the CIA-backed coup in Kiev and installed our puppet government there. So we've been, I think it's a lot more than $65 billion. I mean, I'll ask you guys in the chat room right now. Like, do you guys think it's more than $65 billion or less than $65 billion? Or just right around that $65 billion. Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious about that. So far on this Tuesday, California's wildfires have wiped out 10,000 homes and counting and structures. Families are scrambling right now for shelter, struggling to figure out where their next meal will come from, and wondering how they're ever going to rebuild their lives. These are Americans living through a disaster of unimaginable proportions. And the government's grand solution, a one-time pittance that won't even cover like a week's rent or food. It's unbelievable. By the way, why did North Carolinians only get $750? So the wildfire victims get $770. I guess what, like accounting for inflation since Hurricane Helene hit and tore through Tennessee and North Carolina and Georgia and Florida?
Blue state surtax.
I guess. Why add $20?
You had people out in California and everything, like when North Carolina happened, saying, oh, it's not a big deal. They're all, it's a red state anyway, blah, blah, blah. This being a blue state, I think they're going to realize, maybe we shouldn't have these Democrats in power because, Trump said a long time ago to Gavin Newsom, you need to get prepared, prepare the ground, rake and get all the dead leaves and trees up off the ground. And he's like, yeah, whatever. So hopefully this is we may see California turn red after this.
Maybe. We saw Megyn Kelly yesterday posted sort of an anecdotal story, but she was talking about a friend of hers who she says is woke. She lives in this area. And she said, all of my friends who are woke Democrats are now voting Republican. They're sick of it. They're over it. That's anecdotal, of course, but who knows? Anyway, this is a slap.
But look at Gavin Newsom's priorities right now. He has just earmarked $50 billion to Trump-proof California, meaning he is setting aside money to litigate against the federal...
or million?
50 billion. Let me look. 50 million. I apologize. 50 million. So that's 25 million just to launch litigation against the federal government of your taxpayer money, but you don't get water out of the fire hydrants.
No, they were literally in a special session. So California legislature sitting in a special session while their state, the entire cities are burning up. And they were literally having a special session on how to deal with Trump.
Right.
That's their priority?
For the hypothetical deportations, right? They're saying, how do we protect illegal immigrants who are setting fires? How do we now make sure that we are ready to litigate against the federal government?
To slap in the face.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
So this message from Washington is clear. Americans come second. Your suffering is an afterthought. Billions for Ukraine, billions for Israel, a country, by the way, that has a space force. Yeah, Israel has a space program and a budget surplus. So Israel has more money in the bank. We have a massive $35 trillion deficit. Israel's doing just fine. And we can send them billions of dollars. But you get crumbs for Californians. You get crumbs for the people of Maui. You get crumbs for North Carolinians and those that live in Tennessee and Florida and Georgia. Crumbs. These people don't give a rat's behind about you. Can you imagine for a second if California was a liberal state? Oh, wait. Like, what more do you need to do? How much ass kissing did liberals need to do here in order to get some sort of, care at all from the Biden administration? I mean, literally, you could argue that the people that live in Southern California, maybe Berkeley, are like the Kamala Harris supporters, right? They are the ones. They are like the textbook liberals who supported Biden and supported Kamala Harris. What more ass kissing do you need to do than get a little help from the guy that you elected? Mm-hmm. That's it. These are the people. Go ahead, Phil.
What kind of psychological warfare is this that it's like, okay, even with like the stimulus checks and everything, it's like it's never over $1,000. It's like we got to keep it under $1,000 because it's just enough to make them so that they're happy they can buy stuff, but not enough to really help them.
Enrich them.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's review the last 4 years of the Biden administration when illegal immigrants got debit cards worth upwards of between $1,000 and $10,000 at a time. For what? For just arriving. Right. And so you have to put this in context to how taxpayer money is being used for who.
A couple of comments here. I like this. Television shows on our chat says, Redacted, don't forget about the $43 million per week to the Taliban in Afghanistan that we're still paying. Yeah, we just did a whole segment interview last week on this exact subject. Tim Burchett, who's put that forward to stop those payments. And Comic Andy's in our chat says Boston Tea Party time. And it's funny. I was talking with Grim earlier. Grim, who does all of our graphics here. He's a U.S. military veteran, by the way. He said, I can't believe, he said, what a kick in the nuts this is. He's like, I can't believe that we haven't had sort of like a French Revolution moment here in the United States, and you're saying like Boston Tea Party time. Like, how much longer are Americans going to take this from these leaders?
It's the fluoride.
They care more. Maybe they care more about Ukraine than they do Americans.
I just wonder how we can convince Putin to invade California so they can get money.
So we can get help from them.
If he can invade LA, we'll write him a check right now. Here you go, $20 billion.
Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
We're to the rescue. We're going to rebuild California from Putin's aggression.
Yeah.
Said it's liberal policy aggression. So that's that big part of the story. Side note story on something we're working on here and putting these pieces together. Something big appears to be happening at U.S. airports, according to friend of the show, journalist Ryan Mata. Now, we know that undocumented illegal immigrants are being flown into the United States under the command of the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State under Antony Blinken and Alejandro Mayorkas. We've documented that many, many times here on the show. But something appears to be ramping up, and a number of sources have come forward to make this point to Ryan. And I just we're piecing some of this together here, but I want to share some of this out in the open in case there's some sort of a false flag event or something that's about to unfold here. So here is what a source has now spilling the beans on what's happening at Los Angeles International Airport. There may or may not be large commercial charter flights full of undocumented, unregistered individuals from a certain continent originating from Nogales International Airport. Okay, where are they coming from? OLS and landing at Los Angeles International Airport. They're exiting through the PS LAX, the private suite terminal at Los Angeles International Airport, and they're coming en masse. The Rosendin Company and SASCO are the commercial electrical contractors responsible for turning off the CCTVs to hide these flights and to hide them when they get out of the flights. And there are general blackouts when these individuals touch down and they get bussed out of the LAX terminal. Now, they're being set loose on the already devastated population in Los Angeles. People need to evacuate ASAP. LAPD is not responding to this stuff. Don't ask how I know this. Now, multiple other sources have now come forward to confirm this. It's happening not just at LAX, but Miami International Airport and other places. What is happening a week before President Trump takes office? Not exactly sure. They, of course, delete these flight histories. So when you go to try to find these registries, you won't find them. They hide these flights, especially if they're government flights. So if you're looking for them, you're not going to find them in the logs, of course. MonkeyWorks, of course, military veteran who spent more than 30 years in aerospace and defense, does a great job tracking these flights. You guys know MonkeyWorks pretty well. He's been tracking these flights for years under the Biden administration. He says they are still flying in about 70,000 illegals per month into the United States. And he tracks this stuff every day. Watch.
197. So just shy of 200. But keep in mind, I've stripped out close to, well over 150, probably close to 160 trainers out of that equation. So it's cleared the skies up a little bit. Got a lot of air refuelers up. And
so he talks not about just the reconnaissance flight, also talks about the Omni flights, of course, which are government flights. So those are off the book. So if you're trying to track all of this, where these flights are coming from, why they're coming in right now, and why a number of sources are coming forward in the few days, of course, before President Trump's inauguration, you need to, I don't know, I think we need to be paying attention to this. So we're going to continue to follow that part of the story, but I wanted to bring it to you as we continue to move forward on this.
All right. Well, President-elect Trump says that he's going to focus on revenue from abroad instead of taxing U.S. citizens. So this is, in the words of Trump, this is bigly. Here is the announcement that he made on his Truth Social account. He says, for far too long, we've relied on taxing our great people using the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements. The American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It's time for that to change. So he's announcing the External Revenue Service to collect our tariffs, duties, and revenue that come from foreign sources, and that will be born on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025. So just think about it. What he wants is for the American economy to make money by doing business abroad instead of relying on breaking the backs of its own citizens. Now, this is currently how it works. The average American pays the federal and state government the equivalent of money that they make between January and May of any given calendar year. And in fact, the IRS even admits it on their own website. They call it Tax Freedom Day. You can find this on irs.gov. It's the number of days that an American has to work to earn enough money to pay federal, state, and local taxes. In most states, you see, the redder it is, the longer you have to work in order to pay your taxes. And then you don't keep anything until after that day. So take a look at this for yourself. Zoom in on it later. Find it on irs.gov. If you live in New York State, you have to work the longest until May 14th before you keep a dime. The states with the earliest that you can stop working for the government are Louisiana, April 4th. They have it the best, I guess. Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, April 5th. So what if that were not the case? What if you could pay less because our government is doing business abroad and funding itself that way, doing business with the world? Is this a pipe dream, do you think, or could it actually work? Well, possibly it could decrease our U.S. deficit, but only if we stop actually overspending, because the IRS does not have a collection problem. The IRS have an outlay problem. We've discussed this before. Our debt comes from overspending, not under collecting. That's a misnomer. But of course, I want to point this out because this is relevant. Today, as I'm researching this story, I realized that the IRS also have a competency problem as well. From personal experience, here's a letter that Clayton and I received in the mail today. This is, we're not in trouble. Don't worry. We had a friendly exchange from our 2022 filings because we lived abroad and we missed one 1099. So they're saying you actually owe a little bit more based on this 1099. But I don't dispute the amount. I dispute the fact that they've given me a deadline of November 25th, 2024, but they didn't write the letter until December 30th. So how can I go back and respond to the letter in arrears? I don't have a time machine. This speaks to a basic competency, wouldn't you say, of the IRS? And it's just so frustrating because we pay them our tax dollars to collect from us 5 months of our paycheck out of the year, and they're not even doing a good job of it. They don't even have a base. They don't know how to use a calendar.
That's so disgusting. I mean, I just think about when we cut that check every quarter for our taxes. I mean, and that's a lot of money that we pay the government.
To buy a drone.
I mean, we literally freaking pay. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then to think that in split seconds, milliseconds, that money is sent to Ukraine, or it's sent to go off and kill somebody in Syria or something. Like, it's unbelievable to me. Like, and they have the audacity to send us a letter like that.
It's just, I don't know what to do with that. I'm fine to pay the amount. I'm an American. I owe it. This is my current social contract. But the idea that they can't even use a calendar, it's...
You could watch my whole interview with a former IRS agent who was in charge of going after people who didn't pay their IRS tax bills. And he actually discovered that it's unconstitutional to pay income tax. He's like, he was driving one day on his way to a frickin' to deal with a client who ended up having this issue and was, wasn't paying their taxes or something. And he's listening to the radio and he hears a radio show about how income taxes are illegal.
Right.
And it's unconstitutional.
Yes, you should absolutely look into
Watch that whole interview that I did.
But what we're looking at going forward is whether or not a Trump administration would actually put competent people and stop breaking our backs to wage war abroad. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish my thought, but that's marriage. So anyway, I was just going to say, go seek out that interview because, it's disgusting. And he says you don't have to do it. And he teaches people how not to do it because, there's no precedent for it. So anyway, go seek out that interview. Maybe we'll link it up in the description.
Well, before we move on to our next story, this is a great time to remind you about our show sponsor, Tax Network USA, because if you do have back taxes, they can be advocates for you. You don't want to deal with them on your own. Tax Network USA is the nation's premier tax relief firm, and they've negotiated over $1 billion in tax relief for their clients. They include penalty forgiveness, hardship programs, wherever you are, whatever your tax situation is, you need an ally, someone on your side, because you should not deal with them directly, as the image I just showed you just demonstrated quite clearly they are neither competent nor friendly. So even if you're behind on your taxes due to missing personal or business records, they can guide you through the collection process. The tax season is, of course, just about to start and long over in previous years. So now is the time to get personalized support. Head on over to tnusa.com/redacted or call them 1-800-958-1000 for a free tax consultation. Once again, that's tnusa.com/redacted or give them a call 1-800-958-1000 for a free tax consultation today.
If you want to pay them.
Do your own research.
Yeah,
this is not a tax advisement site.
Yes.
And they are the professionals. We are not.
No, just go seek out the interview with an actual former IRS agent. It's not my words, it's his. Anyway, so here's an interesting move. DJI, the makers of the world's largest civilian drone maker, they make these. This is a DJI drone right here, and a Chinese company, just announced a pretty big change for U.S. drone users. Starting this week, they're swapping out their own geofencing system for official FAA data. In plain English, what that means is DJI drones will now follow the FAA's no-fly zones instead of the company's old built-in restrictions. Why is this happening right now? Right before Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. Just a few days before President Trump arrives in Washington, D.C. and puts his hand on the Bible. Okay, this change rolled out yesterday, and the timing is kind of eyebrow-raising, wouldn't you say? It's very odd that this is happening just a week before Trump's inauguration. All of the chatter about drones flying over cities, flying over Bedminster. It's very interesting. Military bases. Plus, it's hard not to see that this is a response to all that heat that Chinese companies like TikTok have been getting lately. DJI explained, of course, remember TikTok is a Chinese company. It's owned by ByteDance, located in Beijing, right? So DJI explained that the update on their blog, Viewpoints, here's the gist. Instead of outright blocking flights in certain areas, the updated system will mark these spots as, quote, enhanced warning zones, meaning they'll alert you, but it's on you to come back. Now it's on you to turn around and get out of that zone. Before, DJI would send your drone back home. You couldn't fly into those areas. It would restrict you from doing anything like that. In fact, I found out the hard way when I launched. Here's some video that I filmed flying into some fireworks on New Year's Eve. And this is me filming this. My drone goes up, flies towards the fireworks. And as I got close to that zone, guess what? Drone headed home. Restricted zone. And it flew me right back home. I couldn't fly through those fireworks, and it returned to sender. That's exactly how it usually happens. Have anything to do with this TikTok ban, though? I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Does it have anything?
If it had anything to do with, because the FAA sharing information with a Chinese company, I wonder which side of that falls on, in the TikTok, because they don't want a Chinese company having American information. So if the FAA was sharing and they no longer are, or if now this Chinese company wants that FAA information and they're going to get it. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that could be. Or that they're sort of bending the knee right now to the FAA so that the U.S. government gets to say where and when people can fly their drones in the United States instead of a Chinese company that's controlling these zones. I don't exactly know. I wonder if it has anything to do at all with what Tucker Carlson said just last night about all of those drones that we were seeing across the east coast of the United States and what he learned about how they were stopped. Watch.
An intel person told me that this person believed that they were in fact Chinese, and that a Chinese satellite went down, was visible to the naked eye. There were news stories about it. It evaporated, it burned up, and that this person told me that was taken down by the U.S. government. That was a command and control satellite for these drones. And the belief was the Chinese government was sending the following message: we're moving on Taiwan and maybe other things. You can't do anything about it.
Have anything to do with that? Of course, many people posted this. This appears to be the satellite that was shot out of the sky. Isn't it kind of crazy? You can actually see Saturn right there with the powerful lens. Isn't that crazy? You can see Saturn at the top of the screen. I love that.
With its rings.
With its rings, it's so cool. But anyway, there's the presumed. This happened in December when all of this happened. All that drone activity suddenly stopped. after this Chinese satellite was taken down, according to Tucker. Really fascinating. So another drone blog pointed out how this change could be DJI's way of staying in the U.S.'s good graces, to kind of answer Philip's point here. As scrutiny on Chinese tech, of course, ramps up. Whether that's the case or not, it's a big shakeup for drone users, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But that's a common thread of drone users. It's like, you can't go near these certain airports, you can't go to these certain zones, because it automatically stops you from flying into those zones.
Yeah.
And prevents you from it. It's like hitting a wall. It's like hitting an invisible wall, and it'll return. You can't fly there. It'll return your drone back to you. So now that's all open. Now it's all on you. I don't know.
It's all on you, but then you get approached by the gendarme, like Clayton did.
Yes. I was flying my drone over Point du Hoc in Normandy, because I wanted the kids to be able to see the scaling of how the U.S. Army Rangers scaled the wall on D-Day. And so I flew my drone out down into the water, right above the water, and scaled up Point du Hoc. And then the French got after me. They yelled at me about it.
Yes.
No drones.
Yeah, he says.
Oui.
No drones. So
no drones.
He's been...
I'm in trouble.
In trouble more often than not with that drone. All right. Well, Starbucks is reversing its anti-racist policy that they put in place in 2018. In 2018, you may recall this incident that Starbucks rolled out this major racism training program and had to do major PR in all of their stores after this incident.
No longer, no further. Protesters calling for justice today. After the arrests of 2 black men at this Philadelphia Starbucks on Thursday. This video, captured by a witness's cell phone, shows police talking and later handcuffing the men while they were waiting for a friend. The men wanted to use the restroom, but the manager said that per store policy, they couldn't since they didn't buy anything. When they wouldn't leave, she called police.
A group of males refused to leave.
Some witnesses say the officers overreacted.
They're just sitting there quietly, sitting on their phones, chatting, just like everyone else in Starbucks was.
Philadelphia's police commissioner says the officers didn't do anything wrong.
They followed policy. They did what they were supposed to do.
All right. Well, you may recall the video. It went viral. These men were just sitting there. They didn't buy anything. The manager asked them to leave, and then they further got arrested. After this, Starbucks even closed their stores in order to lecture all of their employees about racism. It was after 1 p.m., all stores in 2018 were shut so that they could have this anti-racist training. And they changed their policy after that, saying, okay, we will allow people to hang out in our stores, use the bathroom, whether or not they buy anything or not, because we don't want to be racist. Well, now you've lived through that, and you know what it did to Starbucks. It made their bathrooms unusable. It allowed homeless people to squat in there. It allowed people to be made uncomfortable by non-customers. That's what happens. Too many unpleasant experiences for people like this iced venti breve sitting over here next to me to work in, right? Yeah,
that's right.
That is his coffee order.
Yeah.
Venti iced breve. It could be -12 outside, and he still gets an iced breve.
That's right.
So now they say that you must purchase something in order to hang out in a Starbucks. Has nothing to do with racism or classism. It is just business policy, bathrooms and lounges for customers only. A Starbucks statement called this a practical step that helps them prioritize our paying customers who want to sit and enjoy our cafes and need to use the restroom during their visit. By setting clear expectations for behavior and use of our spaces, we can create a better environment for everyone. So clearly has nothing to do with race, has everything to do with just they need to maintain their bathrooms and their lounges for their paying customers. Pretty reasonable, right? It's a return to reason.
It seems reasonable. And I know socialists that don't like this idea, but this is exactly what a business is allowed to do. They're allowed to say, "Hey, you need to pay. You need to buy something in order to use our bathrooms."
Gas stations do it all the time.
We built this store. We have employees here. We're paying for a nice experience. It's not racist if we tell you to buy something, to buy a donut or to buy a drink, to use our toilets that we pay for.
Right.
Like everyone's a victim.
Yes. Well, no longer. Starbucks says we actually need to make money in order to maintain these spaces to have a business. Starbucks is also trying to get paying customers to stay a little longer. Did you notice this one, honey? By offering 1 free refill for iced or hot coffees for in-store orders.
But they've always, if you're a Starbucks card owner.
No, not anymore. Now it's for everybody. You can
everyone.
stay and you don't get a refill of
like the fancy
espresso drink, but you can get a refill of no.
Yeah. I thought I was going to get a refill of my mocha.
No,
sorry. No,
you two snowflakes in your Starbucks.
your caramel frappuccino. Sorry, you're not getting that. No.
Yeah.
Your smoothie.
So for those of you
I'm
who
a black cold brew guy.
Are you
Black and,
at Starbucks?
I can see that.
Okay.
No, I never.
You know what I
like? I'm a Dutch Brothers guy.
Dutch Brothers.
I like BlackRock.
Dutch Brothers.
I'm like the
Dutch
manliest
Brothers.
person here.
I like
you
Dutch
guys.
Brothers. No, she gets a peppermint. She gets
I don't.
A peppermint.
I get a
mocha.
drip. I get a drip with cream.
She gets a
no
flat
sugar
white.
even.
She's lying. She's lying. She's busted in her lies.
I'm not. It's him that goes to Starbucks. I don't go to Starbucks.
Man, I like. I was at the Toyota place today to get my truck taken care of, and I ate. I drink coffee everywhere. I drink crappy coffee all over the place.
He's indiscriminate.
Yeah, I'm indiscriminate.
He'll have a Keurig and then he'll have a $8 latte.
So I had the the styrofoam cup coffee today. Getting my truck fixed.
That's manly, I guess.
Yeah.
When I used to make my own pots of coffee, if there was some left, I would just let it sit there till the next day, pour it in a cup, and then the next morning and microwave it. I have no shame. I will drink any coffee.
But then it's super strong from sitting there steeping.
Yeah.
And so then you're sneezing with your eyes open. Yeah. All right. Well, so for those of you who may or may not want to forgive Starbucks a little bit of wokeness, I still will not, because they support the war in Gaza and also chop off young people's boobs. But you can if you want to. Go ahead.
Well, way to virtue signal.
I am virtue signaling. I don't want to go to Starbucks if they pay for gender reassignment surgery. Yeah. No, thank you. You can if you want to.
Okay. I love gender reassignment surgery, so I'm going to do that. What about Black? What is it? Black Rock coffee?
Black Rock is the one I go to.
Yeah, I like that one too. I like that a lot. By the way, incidentally, we should point out on Election Day, there was a lady decked out in a full Trump car in front of us at Black Rock when we were in the drive-thru at Black Rock Coffee, and she bought us coffee.
She did.
It was so nice
because
I
interacted with her about the election and.
Amazing.
She paid for my coffee.
All right, we got more news to get to here on your Tuesday, if you can believe it. We're going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard flip-flopping on this FISA regulation, 702 FISA, and what that means for warrantless spying on Americans. We're going to speak to a former CIA whistleblower who was imprisoned by the Obama administration for calling out the CIA's war crimes, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Ledger, because we're in a world where digital lives are in a constant threat. It's more important than ever to take control of your own security. That's where Ledger comes in. Ledger has been the leading name in hardware wallets for 10 years, trusted by 7 million users, securing 20% of the world's digital assets. So if you've got Bitcoin, you've got crypto, you need to check out their new devices. They have their new Ledger Stacks and their new Ledger Flex. Game changers, secure touchscreens that make managing your crypto and logins easier and safer than ever. With Ledger, you're not just buying a wallet, you're investing in your own digital sovereignty. Protect your crypto from hackers and scammers and take control of your financial future. Plus, the Ledger Security Key app offers a powerful alternative to traditional passwords, giving you an extra layer of protection for all of your online accounts. Secure your digital future today. Buy your Ledger device now at ledger.com, or there on your screen, shop.ledger.com/redacted, shop.ledger.com/redacted, and take charge of your digital security with Ledger. Well, Tulsi Gabbard has just pulled an about-face, flip-flopping on her position on the warrantless wiretapping of Americans. According to reports this week, Tulsi Gabbard, who was once a member of Congress, of course, and pushed to repeal Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, now says that she will support it. Why the flip-flop? So is it now okay to just spy on Americans, something she spoke out so vociferously against? What happened to her spying on this issue? What happened to John Ratcliffe? What is his position on all of this? We'll get to that part in a second. But let's ask someone who's very outspoken on the government spying on Americans. That is CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou, who John told the truth about what our intelligence agencies were doing during the Iraq War. For telling the truth, President Obama went after him and had him charged, put in prison. Yes, John went to jail for exposing the CIA. So CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou joins us now. John, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So first, let's talk about Tulsi. We'll get to John Ratcliffe in a second here. I think most of the, as you know, I think you rightly point out, most of the attention has been on Tulsi. She's been very outspoken, of course, against Section 702 all her time in Congress, really against spying on Americans. And by the way, she was targeted by the NSA. It's an unbelievable sort of turn of events here that she would be heading up the DNI. When you heard this sort of flip-flop, what was your immediate response to that?
My immediate response was one of disappointment, but I happened to be with a couple of friends of mine who are involved in the Trump transition team when I heard this news. And they said, wait a minute, let's think about this for a second. Tulsi's one of only 2, possibly 3 Trump appointees who may be in some trouble in the Senate, the others being Bobby Kennedy and perhaps Pete Hegseth. She may have done this. She may have carried out this flip-flop on 702 just to placate Republican senators who otherwise would be very happy to vote in favor of her confirmation. And then that would allow her to flip back. And now that would be a little bit, it would be a little bit hypocritical, but you know, this is Washington and people do what they need to do in order to save their careers and their nominations. I hope that that's the case, because Tulsi has been one of the very few voices in government in either party to support the liberty and constitutional freedoms of Americans that have been guaranteed to us in the Constitution. Remember, not only was it illegal to spy on Americans until Barack Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, thus allowing NSA to spy on Americans, but it's actually a part of NSA's charter that it is forbidden from spying on Americans. We just pretend that that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm hoping that this was just kind of a cynical move to placate some Republican senators until after the vote, and then we'll see what happens when 702 actually comes back up for reauthorization.
I'm not confident in it at all, and you're just allowing this to proliferate. We've talked at length here on the show about how innocent Americans are caught up in this web, this overly broad system. Can you talk a little bit about how bad this really is? I mean, Americans, if they're sitting there and their eyes are glazing over and they're going about their day, I mean, this violates the United States Constitution, does it not?
It absolutely does violate the Constitution. And remember, Americans who are being spied on have no idea that they're being spied on. When the government goes to the FISA court to get a warrant to spy on an American citizen, that citizen has no idea that this warrant has been issued. That citizen is not permitted to defend himself before the FISA court. The government is under no obligation to tell this American that he's even being looked at for having committed a crime, let alone a national security crime. So there's literally no defense that is permitted to be mounted. And on top of all that, the FISA court has denied approval to less than 1% or on less than 1% of the cases that have been presented to it. So not only do you have no idea that the government is intercepting your phones, your phone calls, intercepting your emails and your text messages, even if you did, you wouldn't be allowed to defend yourself.
It doesn't. I mean, it sounds like something out of North Korea, right?
It's un-American.
So, are you confident in any capacity? I mean, you sound a little hopeful that maybe they're just doing some maneuvering here, that when push comes to shove and this comes back up again, that Tulsi Gabbard will put her foot down.
Well, you know, friends accuse me of being irrationally hopeful, and I hope that they're wrong in this case. I will say that out of just about anybody who could have been chosen for this job, Tulsi Gabbard is pretty much the only person who has ever expressed any serious reservations about Section 702. And so, you know, I wrote a piece when she was first named as the new DNI saying that this was an inspired choice. This was somebody who many of us, for whom civil liberties are important, could rally around. I would hate to see her beaten down whether it was from the right or the left, on something that is so critical to civil liberties and civil rights. I hope she's able to stand up. And I hope that she can rally Republicans in the Senate, because she doesn't need to win a single Democratic vote to be confirmed. She only needs to keep the Republicans together. She could lose 2 or 3 Republican votes, 3 if we then go to Vice President Vance for a tiebreaker. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm hoping that whatever it is she's promising these senators, whether it's to change her position on 702 or to give 702 a harder look, whatever it is she's telling them, I hope that that's enough.
We mentioned John Ratcliffe. Of course, Trump named John Ratcliffe as the new CIA director. He also headed up the DNI for a short stint. Where does he come down on 702?
That's a great question. In the very beginning, when 702 was first written back in, October of 2001, he was, as a private citizen, he says he was opposed to 702. When he was finally elected to Congress, he voted in favor of 702 a couple of times, although he did express some reservations. Now, every 2 years since 702 was implemented, it gets slightly fewer votes in Congress. I hope that that trend continues. If somebody like John Ratcliffe, who's highly respected on both sides of the aisle, even if Democrats don't necessarily agree with his policies, they like and they respect the man, and they believe that he's qualified to do the job as CIA director. I hope that he can be one of those leaders who can go back to Capitol Hill and say, 702 is a problem. 702 is probably unconstitutional. We need to take another look at it.
We talk often here on this show how corrupt and dangerous and scary the CIA is. Add in the FBI. You know all too well. Blowing the whistle on the CIA and their crimes. The Obama administration went after you. Where do you think the CIA sits in all of this now? Is the CIA able to be fixed, or is it too far gone?
Honestly, I think it's too far gone. And the problems are multifold. First of all, Donald Trump is going to be president for 4 years. But the moment he puts his right hand up in the air on Inauguration Day, he's a lame duck. And if you look at the leadership of the CIA, the civil service leadership of the CIA, those people have been there for 25 years, 30, 35 years in some cases. And they know that they can outweight this president, just like they can outweight every president. And so if there's an order that comes down from the Oval Office that they don't like, they can ignore it, or they can slow roll it and delay it until Donald Trump just simply isn't the president anymore. That's what I fear, that they're just going to marginalize Donald Trump like they've marginalized other presidents that they didn't like. That's the real danger. But if you're going to have real change in this, first of all, you have to have oversight committees in the Senate and the House that have the guts to actually implement that change and order that change. And I think the place has to be torn apart. That's what I'm hopeful will happen in the FBI with Kash Patel as the director. The place has to be torn down to the bare studs and rebuilt. I say the same thing about the CIA.
John, great to see you. Thank you for your bravery in all of this. I know you were right at the tail end of the last Trump administration, and there was big push, obviously, to try to get you a pardon alongside Julian Assange. I remember my friend Tucker that night doing really an impassioned message. It was like a direct message from Tucker to Donald Trump, like, you need a pardon.
God bless Tucker Carlson. Yeah, God bless Tucker Carlson. He's one of the few that had the guts to go on the record supporting a pardon. And I like to think that I've got some pretty high-placed friends in the Trump administration, and I'm excited about what the next 4 years have to offer. And here on Unified Television, this is a network that has long supported whistleblowers and has given whistleblowers a venue to speak truth to power. So there are a lot of things I'm very grateful for right now.
Well, it's amazing. I think it's a new era that we can hear from people like you who are holding truth to power and being able to spread these messages about these corrupt government politicians and these organizations inside the government. We can hopefully clean this deep state out once and for all. John, great to see you. Thank you for your bravery. Thanks for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. The pleasure's all mine. Good to see you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Brave guy. Thank you to John there. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, will Tulsi then go back on this? Is she punking all of us right now? It's deeply troubling though, because she was outspoken on it,
Like where he was saying, he's like, it's like it might be false hope. And I was like, I just don't know if I buy she's just doing it just to get into place and then flopping back. I don't know.
Right.
I just don't know if I buy that.
It's too much angling.
It's a tactic. Because somebody said on X that it's actually what Trump wants. But I don't know that to be true. I haven't researched that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
Well, coming up after our next sponsor, we want to ask the question, is DEI education racist? After one dad went viral for saying we're teaching our kids to hate each other. Well, we talked to the author of the new book, let's see, let me get it right. Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. It's a fantastic book. This is the first time we've spoken to Wilfred Riley, hopefully not the last. So we want to show you part of this conversation, and we filmed this as a redacted conversation so you can see our entire conversation later on the channel. But it's an important conversation to have, especially because the incoming Trump administration has said he's going to outlaw DEI education and critical race theory because it's racist. Clearly it is. The last 4 years have shown that. So we're going to continue to have this conversation and hopefully hold a Trump administration's feet to the fire on this one. But before we do that...
Yes, indeed. Do you ever feel like you're being surveilled and you hesitate to share things of interest via text message or email with your friends and loved ones? Recently, outspoken parents at PTA meetings and Catholic Americans have been labeled as domestic terrorists by the FBI. These types of labels can be used to allow the U.S. government to surveil its citizens and others who live abroad without any legal due process. We were just talking about this FISA, these illegal warrantless spying on Americans. Fortunately, the founders of Bunker have created an app to uphold people's rights. Bunker is not beholden to any third party, corporation, investor, or government. Bunker deeply believes that privacy is a human right and everyone on earth deserves a bank level security. Bunker provides your protection from state and corporate surveillance as well as cyber criminals. It includes a completely secure and private messenger, a robust password manager, and secure cloud storage for your files and your documents. Bunker is built to uphold the rights of people and protect them from cybercrime. So you can download it right now. Just go to bunker.life. You can grab it out there on their website, or just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store. Use the offer code REDACTED to receive your first year for free. Try it for 1 year for free. Use our code REDACTED. Go to bunker.life or just download it on the App Store or the Google Play Store.
The tenets of critical race theory teach that the United States is uniquely racist and violent, and that Black people are still the victims of that skewed historical narrative. Recently, I spoke with Wilfred Riley about this. He's the author of the fantastic book, Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me, and he talked about why it's useful to continue to sell that narrative in the United States and how we can think about this and actually know the truth. Watch. Let's talk about the narrative about slavery, that Africans have had it the worst ever in the whole history of humankind, more than at the hands of white people specifically. And there are so many stories to disprove that. You focus on the 14-year Assange War, the Mongols, to name a few. Why do you think, though, that, even though this is not part of your book, why do you think Black people are sold this lie about being the worst victims ever? And they are still the worst victims ever. And can you speak of then this professional victimhood that can result from this?
Yeah, I think that narrative is sold to Black Americans because it's instrumentally useful. I mean, Black Americans are still a large, fairly successful but struggling group in the United States, which contains an even more successful group that used to oppress Black Americans at the group level. So it makes sense to pitch slavery to Black people and to say, how can you ever forget this? This was done to you. Now go out and vote for the more left-leaning of the two major parties and demand money. That's the reason for this focus. And people like Al Sharpton and so on, after probably a few scotches, have pretty openly admitted this to reporters. I mean, so that I think is what's going on. The problem with that is that people actually come to believe things that they're told all the time. And this actually really impacts people's understanding of history. It impacts people's understanding of global power relations, other things that actually matter. So, I mean, obviously, you know this already. Most people in the audience for a program like this would know this. We've got a cat here. Um, but slavery is not a unique American sin. I mean, the USA and Britain actually played a major role in abolishing slavery globally, which you should take a great deal of pride in. Slavery was one of the oldest human vices. I mean, if you go back 7,000 or 8,000 years to the Sumerians and Akkadians, the start of civilization, slavery was the Aztecs and Incas in the New World. Slavery was just what you did when you stopped massacring everyone on the losing side after a battle. So you reach a point of civilization where you no longer kill and eat them. You've got to do something with them. So they go and, what's the Monty Python line? Improve the agricultural development of the Commonwealth. And this went on for many thousands of years. Slave is a hieroglyphic word in Sumer and Egypt. And it's generally something like, and I'm being a bit crude here, but the word for another group of people with a shackle drawn next to it. It just means defeated warrior, man from the mountains, man from the Zagros, but you've been captured. And you go on from there, of course, to Greek slavery, Roman slavery. And in the book, I discussed the Arabic slave trade. So the Arabic slave trade went on for longer than the white-dominated Atlantic slave trade. It transshipped about 17 million people, both blacks and whites, instead of 12 million people. This insanely, by the way, is used by some Afrocentrists to argue that the Arabs weren't as bad because they weren't racist. So the Arabs would enslave black
Which is
people,
crazy because the Arabs actually castrated their slaves so they would not have second generations. So that's not racist.
People that castrated black and white fighting men. If they captured you, they would surgically modify you. So a certain sort of person will argue, yeah, well, the Arabs had 17 million slaves, and yeah, they cut everyone's bleeps off, but at least they weren't bigots. And I think that in America, we've attached this weird significance to certain sins, like personal bigotry. So people are expected to sort of nod their heads and say, that's a very serious point. I mean, in reality, of course, enslaving a third more people and also castrating them is clearly much worse if we're ranking things logically. But, I talk about that. I talk about the Barbary slave trade, which is a trade specifically in whites. That was mostly North African, some Black African raiders attacking Europeans and selling them. So, I mean, this is just something that all humans did. Whites, blacks, Middle Easterners, Asians, all won, to use a simple word, at different times historically. And when they did, the people that were defeated, Genoese fighters or whatever, were taken as slaves. They became galley slaves, agricultural slaves, whatnot. So, I mean, I think it's important to provide that context. Last sentence, the reason for that, right now, about 40%, it was 41, 42% last I read, of young Americans think that only the USA ever had slaves. So it's not that they think, it's not that they think that we had the worst slave system by 5% or something. They think that nobody else ever really had slaves, only we did, and slavery just involved black people. So these are the kind of misperceptions that people have about history. It's not being off a little bit, and that's something I try to correct.
Yes. Well, the chapter about American Indians was fascinating because I'm used to breaking down narratives, but what I didn't realize was that the Cherokee Indians fought with the Confederates, and their ethos was to keep their slaves. 20% of their population, you say, well, I think the number is 19, was slaves. And they were, it was a really violent conflict. And so why do you think there's no narrative to ask the Indians to participate in reparations?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be glib, but the Indians don't have any money. I mean, they're getting some now with the new Buffalo, the great casinos, the housing developments. But the
reparations people do not care about who has money. That's never really a consideration who you're taking from.
Well, they're definitely asking us here in Appalachia. Yeah, I mean, I think that logically that's a very good question. I don't really think that there's any coherent reason they're not. I've actually asked a different frame of that question. Many of the countries that participated in the slave trade outside of kind of core Western Europe, kind of that Charles Murray Triangle, actually are just substantially wealthy. I mean, you've got Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Dubai, Nigeria, Spain, Portugal. Even Ghana's a rising power these days, Oman. So why aren't they ever confronted with a bill by kind of the Jesse Jacksons of the world? And the short answer is that the Saudi king or the premier in Spain, whatever the title is, would just tell you to go home. I mean, it would be viewed as kind of a joke. They'd let you stay at the Four Seasons for a week, and then they'd very politely ship you back and never let you back into the country. So I think that, and this is probably the same thing with the Cherokee tribe, the reason that upper middle class whites are most often hit with this kind of BS is that I think they're fairly receptive to it. For whatever reason, I think there's been a lot of training in historical guilt among members of this one group who are inclined to feel noblesse oblige, which might go back to Europe. I don't think most other people do. Like, my own feeling on historical warfare is that, my ancestors, I'm Black, Irish, a little bit Plains Indian, did pretty well. I mean, all three of those groups really only lost to the British and various descendants of the British. But I mean, they killed a lot of people. They were obviously conquered at some point. That's how I came to be here. But I don't really feel any shame or pride about any of that. Like, right now, we're, all in the same place. And my own background was, training as a civil lawyer. So I think that's a pretty healthy way to approach it. And I think that's how most people feel. The people that are inclined to feel some other way are the people you beg for money. I think that's the answer.
But there is a lot of, the narrative is that if you feel too proud of your ethnicity, that is extremely dangerous. You can't be proud that your history, that as an American, that we ended slavery, which you talk about is unique to the British and the Americans. And so there is this fear that you'll be excited to be an American, and that's not allowed. Sort of, that's seen as an extremist view, which is interesting. You can watch that whole interview on our Redacted channel, wherever you get it, on Rumble or YouTube, and we hope that you do. And it's a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating topic. And as I said, I've been using it in some of the conversations we have with our children when they come home with only one part of history. So I want to recommend that you seek out that interview and also read the book. It's Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. So thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow with more Redacted. I want to remind you we have a newsletter. You can find it at redacted.inc. It's totally free. We try to make sure that you have links to original source material so you can study for yourself, form your own opinion. And when I say free, I mean free. There's no upsell or nothing behind a paywall on the Redacted newsletter unless I link you to a site that wants to paywall you. That's not me, that's them. So again, go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then authenticate that email. You'll get it every day that this show comes out, Monday through Thursday. We work really hard on our research for the show and the newsletter. So please do subscribe if you will. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Thanks for being here.